we are ready, then let's begin. So I was rereading session 6 for the Law of One study group in Europe, in which I'm doing these live sessions. And I wanted to share with you guys one of the last exchanges, or two of the last exchanges that happened in this rather long session so far, in session 6. And I will be doing this more often, I think, because I'm finding new things that I can share with you as a student of the Law of One. And if you resonate with my path, which is to bring this understanding to its practical means, how to live the Law of One, then yeah, you will definitely take something out of value here. So speaking of value, in the first conclusion video that I created in the Law of One series, the raw material that I covered right after session 106, I mentioned and I went into more details the categories in which I now value the raw material because of my own path and what I feel is the most important information to me. And that is, first is the mystical or the self-realization information that is contained within the raw material. This is the most elusive one that we can find because it's the Law of One. It's the core teaching, is the essence of the message that Ra gave here. And I'm going to read a little bit about that actually. So you can see how sort of mixed in the information is there, because it was their intention to give the Law of One primarily. And so in this exchange, they expressed that, and it's an important thing to me. So that's the first category, the Law of One, the message, the core essence of what it means. And that is what we call mysticism, is the mystical search for unity. Ra talked about this in session 57. The second category, just to mention them, is the dynamic and processes of the mind. Interesting stuff that we'd find here as explanations to what the intricate mind is doing, and how do we evolve, and what's the purpose, and so on. That information, I would put it in category 2, because it's a sort of, explanation as to, why we are going through these processes. Third category is structure and model of reality, which Ra gives a beautiful one. It's not the only one that we have, but it's very consistent with all the other models that we have, whether that be in science, philosophy, or religion. We always find a specific model that we say, yes, that rings true. So Ra gives something like that. I put that in category 3. Category 4 is transient information, which we're not going to get into, but I will mention some of that because that's where we're going to. So the reason why I'm mentioning all these 4 categories is because we're going to go from category 4 information here that Don was asking to category 1, right? The most important information for those who are in the spiritual path as a seeker, and the seeker seeks the One. So if you are in that path, then these categories, to me, they are the most important ones. 1, 2, 3, 4 being the least important. So what am I reading here? Session 6 can be summarized as just, first, there is the leftover information from session 5, where they were talking about the healing aspect of humans. And it has to do, obviously, with the dissolution of the idea or feeling or perception that we are separate beings. And so it goes from mind and body. And then at the end, they talk about spirit. That end is now in session 6. So it begins with that question and answer, talking about the spirit. And I won't talk about that in this video because I want to reach the end. After going through the session, you see that there is information about Maldek and history of the planet and races that were here, or how they were transferred, and the origins of our civilization, or not civilization, but humanity. And it's very brief and all sparse here and there. But at the end, this brings Don to ask about UFOs. And so, did you travel in a UFO? Is this UFO the type of craft that you use, and so on. And so this is up to question 24 in session 6. Now, remember, the session started with the initiation of spirit, let's say, and healing through spirit. And they talk about that. Beautiful, beautiful information. And that's the one that I would like to focus, of course, in my live sessions in the study group, but also in some of these videos. But this, like I said, is to emphasize that that statement that Ra gave to us, saying, well, this is what we want to talk about. We don't want to talk about this. So I'm going to read from, by the way, the reason why I'm reading from the book directly actually feels pretty nice, but it's because my computer is still not working. Eventually, I'll get it back. But yeah, here in question 25, Don continues to ask questions about this. And in the previous one, Ra talked about the Confederation in service of the One and so on. But Don is interested in, at this point, in very transient information. And he says, do any of them, the crafts, or actually these are the different planetary entities, yes? So he says, do any of them come here at this time in spacecraft in the past, say, 30 years? So he's interested in knowing these past, remember, this is the 80s, and in the 50s, they started seeing a lot of UFOs, and this whole phenomenon started occurring, and so Don was interested in this. So he wanted to know about this. What is Ra's answer? They say, instead of answering directly, they say, we must state that this information is unimportant. If you will understand this, we feel that the information may be acceptably offered. The law of one is what we are here to express. However, we will speak upon this subject. And so they give the answer, which I'm not interested in reading. But that is the answer that they give at the beginning to Don. In essence saying, we consider this information unimportant. See, we are here to talk about the law of one. The law of one is what we're here to express. And that states something very important that Don will catch over time in their sessions and say, yes, I know that this is transient information. I know that you want to talk about this, but he reverts back to some of these questions. And this is something that I'll bring to the conclusions of this video. So keep that in mind if you're still interested in UFOs and have this curiosity about transient information. It's okay. And I'll talk about this at the end. But just want to read you the next exchange. And this is after Ra gives an explanation of, the answer that Don was seeking. I can't really summarize what they said. But to continue on, Don says, I'm fully aware that you are primarily interested. This is question 26, by the way, session 6. You are primarily interested in disseminating the law of one. However, it is my judgment, I could be wrong, that in order to disseminate this material, it will be necessary to include questions such as the one I have just asked for the purpose of creating the widest possible dissemination of the material. If this is not the objective, I could limit my questions only to the application of the law of one. But I understand that at this time, it is the objective to widely disseminate this material. Is this correct? So here's a wrong assumption by Don, which he will probably get from this answer. And is that Ra came here to disseminate the law of one? Yes and no. They came here to talk about the law of one with them because they were interested. They were not interested in offering this information, philosophy, material in general to the public. No, they weren't, because that's just simply not how mystics work or they operate, let's say. And if you haven't noticed, Ra is a deep representation of the mystics' lives here on Earth and anywhere else, because they're talking about unity and the perception of unity. So what does Ra say to this? Don saying, I know you want to talk about the law of one, but I think we should include information that is, interesting to people, that it's curious for people, because people are interested in UFOs. So we can see Don's intention of, hooking people. That's sort of like the clickbait, right? Nowadays, just, and I guess it was a noble idea, noble intention. But what does Ra say? They say, this perception is only slightly distorted in your understanding learning. We wish you to proceed as you deem proper. That is your place. We, in giving this information, find our distortion of understanding of our purpose to be that not only of the offering of information, but the weighting of it according to our distorted perceptions of its relative importance. Thus, you will find our statements at times to be those which imply that a question is unimportant. This is due to our perception that the given question is unimportant. Nevertheless, unless the question contains the potential for answer giving which may infringe upon free will, we offer our answers. In short, they say, well, we simply find information unimportant, and we will talk about any question that you have unless it's infringing upon free will. But you need to ask the questions that you want to ask. And also, at the beginning, they said that this perception is only slightly distorted in your understanding learning. The perception that they wanted to disseminate the law of one. Like I said, they didn't. They didn't care about us reading it or creating a book and all of this. They were interested as simply as just talking to them. They said it. It was their idea, Don, Carla, and Jim, to disseminate, and for us to get these books. So this was a gift from Don, Carla, and Jim, not from Ra. We should keep that in mind. Sometimes we forget about that. So why is this important to me? Because it sets up a couple of things. The first one is that some information is unimportant when in regards to the law of one. In essence, the teaching, the core message. And they weren't here to talk about that. They were here to talk about the law of one. So when we study the material, even if we have interest in this stuff, I think it's okay, to quench our thirst for this transit information. We all have our little curiosities about how, what happened in Egypt, or what is Maldic, or do other civilizations exist, and how do they exist, and so on. I think it's important for us to satisfy those questions. However, I find that in my own path, the more you linger in those investigations, the less energy you have available for reaching into the one. In other words, you're disturbing your mind, or rather agitating your mind in a direction that is obviously not the core essence of the law of one. So in the past, I used to be interested in all of these topics because it gave us a glimpse into what really was, and we can create, a coherent model and so on. But eventually I just started losing interest in all of this information, not only UFOs, but also the different dimensions of being and the planetary origins. And even furthermore, I started losing interest in the structure of the mind and all of this. It's slightly interesting, but everything sort of dissolves into this peace. It's the best word that we can use, into this realization of beingness. So what I'm trying to say is that it's fine that we have an interest in these topics. I think we should honor them. But the more we pay attention to the core message, to what it really means to live the law of one, you will find that those curiosities will start to die out. So this is a suggestion not to ignore your curiosity. If you're still interested in this, you should follow it because there's a reason for that. But rather that you invest, even if it's a little bit of time, in your day to the mystical path of the Law of One. Just as an offering, let's say, Ra says that the greatest service is to offer the self to the Creator, right? So this is what I'm suggesting. Just slightly offer a little bit more of yourself to it. That will enhance your life. That will enhance everything else. Anything else that is not needed will fall away, will just not be needed anymore. And you'll continue to see more of an expansion in consciousness. So that is one of the things that I find here. And I wanted to share it just so you know that this information that we find in the raw material it's rich, it's abundant, but once you narrow your focus on the core message, what Ra actually came here to talk about, you'll find that it's all over the place, and it's not very specific because it's buried in all the questions that had to do with all these other interests that Don had, which again, we all need to quench that thirst for curiosity. And Ra said, the reason why Ra said that they were going to answer any questions is because they came here as teachers, right? Like, we're here to answer questions. If you don't have any questions, we won't say anything. And so it depends on your questions, what kind of answers we're going to give. And we will answer everything. We just won't linger too much on certain topics that we deem unimportant, but we will answer. And we find this with teachers also, non-dual teachers or gurus who are here just to answer questions, right? And they just want to answer questions. I actually find that very satisfying myself. When I have the opportunity to be in a group and people have questions, I love answering questions. But to try to, impose some sort of belief or anything that I have is when I have become more and more conscientious, and I have lost the need, as I used to be, more interested in, telling somebody what was right and what we knew and so on. I just find it even more satisfying to be present to answer questions. So that is what Ra did, and its result is this material. So again, that's all I wanted to say. If I haven't invited you, I talked about the Law of One study group. You can find the links in I don't know if I'll remember and put it in this video, but in the description there's a playlist where you can find the Law of One study group. You'll find the link to Telegram. It's a group. You can go in there and chat with all the members. It's a very beautiful group. So you can also assist to the Thursday calls, which is when we're doing these readings and revisiting the sessions. So with nothing else to say, I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you listening and being interested in this particular path. And I hope you have a great day or a great night. I'll see you in the next video.